2 minutes and counting. We're ready. We're ready. Okay, so we are going to, I think we're going to get started, right? Yeah,
So.
because we have a lot to share with you and we want to make sure that you get your questions in. So let's go. All right, so I think everybody knows me, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm Lynn Maureen Hurdle. I'm known as the conflict closer. And I'm also a mom. I'm an African-American woman. And my work in the world of conflict resolution extends over 40 years. I'm starting to admit that now. I said 35, but it's really 40. As a wife and a mom, my husband Warren and I raised two sons. They're fabulous. Our oldest is about to be 25, and Justin is our youngest. He's 19. And they both...
Not just saying that because they're in earshot, right?
No. Well, they've both been raised with conflict resolution skills, and they've also been raised knowing how to have difficult conversations. That's really important. So, Justin, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Yes. So, hello, everyone. My name is Justin Hurdle Price. I just want to say it is an honor to be here. Any chance that I get to speak as a young person from a young person's perspective in this type of work, it's truly a blessing for me, and I have a lot to say. So the fact that I get the platform to do so, it really means a lot. So thank you for taking the time to just hear me out. So I'm the youngest son of the conflict closer. I am 19, right? African American college student, and my work in conflict resolution actually extends to basically all of my life. This is a family field of work. And so now that I'm being a part of the family, right, I've been able to be a student and really watch and learn as, my mom is doing workshops, my brother's having a role, and my dad's having a role. And so just watching everyone and being able to get my own information before being able to present my own type of workshops, which started at the age of 10. It was really a great experience for me. And so this is me. This work is me. All my life, it's been great stuff. I've been able to run workshops for teachers, administrators, and young people, myself, just like myself. And so to be here, like I said, is an honor, and, I'm excited, nervous, but excited. So let's get started.
All right. So there we are. And here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about self-care, right? And learning how to be ready and how to recover. And what that means is we want you to be ready to have the conversations, and we also want you to be ready to recover from the conversations. Just like with us, emotions can come up, and after a conversation, you don't want to just end the conversation and walk away and go ahead and go to the rest of your life. You really do need to spend some time recovering. So we're going to talk about that today.
We're also going to be getting into laying down the foundation for actually having these meaningful conversations. So where to start, what that looks like.
And we're going to be teaching you some skills for deep listening and communicating the thoughts and feelings associated with the conversation, because I don't care how much listening we get, how many times we take workshops and practice the skills, we never get enough. And so we're going to take you through two deep listening skills that we know that have helped us to be able to have these kinds of conversations.
We're going to be talking about how to move from reaction to response. So really watching how what you say next can start to change the course of the conversation.
And we'll talk about the mistakes that you don't want to make. You might already be making them. So we'll talk about them, and we'll show you how to clean them up if you are already making them. So why this is important? I think it's probably obvious to you, but we want to talk about that anyway, because we think it's really important for us to state this. So it's important to do it now because we're in the midst of two pandemics, right? We've got COVID-19 and we've got racism. And yes, racism has always been here. COVID-19 was here long before they told us that it was here, but we're still dealing with that. And so if we have that happening right now, adults, we as the adults, this is what's happening in the lives of our children and our young people, and they're grappling with it, and they're jumping into difficult conversations with you because most of us are having that. Like, show of hands if you've already trying to have these difficult conversations. Anybody doing that yet? Yeah, most of us are doing that, and we're kind of jumping into it. And we're not necessarily have all the skills needed to have the conversations, and especially to make sure that they're ongoing conversations. So we thought we really needed to have an opportunity to do that now. The other side is that as adults, we're dealing with this too, right? This is something that's happening in our lives too. So we got to manage all of this at the same time that we're trying to really make sure that our children and young people are having these conversations. So we're being hit with a lot of intense feelings. I know I can speak for myself. A lot of intense feelings have been hitting me during this time. And it can be confusing and awkward, troubling and sad at times to start the conversations, right? I mean, these aren't conversations that you're like, oh, I'm so happy we're having these. These are conversations that you know you have to have, but they can be really difficult because of the emotions that are coming up. And our young people, our children are really scrambling right now to make sense of their world. And their world's turning upside down, and none of us were given any warning for that. So from the perspective of our children, our young people, why is it important, you think, Justin, for us to have these conversations?
So from a young person's perspective, I would say that this is all important because as a generation, we need guidance. This is a very scary and confusing time in everyone's lives, but especially for teenagers, right? And so we want to learn. That's something that I will say. As young people, we have that urge to learn new things, right? We are very curious. We are very much willing to put ourselves in positions to learn new things. But at the end of the day, because we're younger people in the world, right, adults have a tendency to dismiss whatever it is that we're saying and what we're feeling because of our age, right? And so when that happens, that causes a withdrawal and a pullback from a young person's side, because at that point, it seems as if, you know, we're too young to feel any of the things that we're feeling. It's almost like it's not validated that we can feel what we're feeling. And so, you know, at that point, understanding that kids, at the end of the day, it's sad to say, can experience feelings like sadness and depression and anxiety and a bunch of things like that, with a time like this going on, right? Not running away from that and being able to accept that that is a harsh reality, but a reality that we can work with really will work a lot of wonders in, you know, individual relationships, but then as a whole, in a world, you know, we are the future at the end of the day. And so, you know, we want to be pointed in the right direction.
Yes. So let's start pointing them in the right direction. Let's start off with the first thing that we really want to talk with you about tonight, which is how to take care of your children in the midst of these conversations, and how to take care of yourself, because you have to take care in order to have the conversations. So Justin.
Yes. So speaking as a young person, right? Children are exposed to a lot of information, whether you want them to be or not, at a very, very young age, right? And so making sure that everyone knows really good breathing techniques at these ages is really, really crucial, so that they know how to handle some of these uncomfortable encounters that they're going to experience. And so before any difficult conversation, you want to start that conversation with belly breathing. And you also want to be able to insert breathing pauses for when you sense that the conversation is starting to get, you know, tense or quiet, or just a lot of information is becoming too much to take in, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and Justin, you were telling me the other day that you use the breathing. Yeah. And I introduced him to breathing at 2. And that was basically because we didn't find this out till later in life, but Justin's an empath, and that means he feels everything very, very intensely. And at 2, it was showing up in him wanting to punch and kick and bite when the feelings were too intense. And so I introduced breathing to him as a way for him, number one, to have some power and control, right, with himself, to have that power over his body, and also number two, as a way for him to manage some of those emotions. So who's surprised that we're going to start with breathing tonight? Okay, then maybe you might be, right? But everybody, the rest of you know, right? We are going to do some breathing now together. And I have to say, don't discount the benefit of knowing how to do it or using it before, during, and after the conversation. Our breath is a part of a powerful system that affects the nervous system, the brain, stress levels, and bodily functions. So some of us know this, or most of us may know this, but you know what? We tend to forget. And so we don't want you starting any difficult conversations without remembering that you're going to need to breathe. So we're going to do some breathing together. So I want you to get comfortable. And if you feel comfortable enough to close your eyes, that's fine. And if you don't, then you can just focus on a point in front of you. And we're going to take some deep belly breaths. So what that means is the belly should rise when you breathe in, and then it should go down when you breathe out. And we're going to be breathing in through our nose, and we're going to be breathing out through our mouth. So we're going to breathe in through our nose to the count of 3. We're going to hold that breath for 3 so that it can circulate and help to expand the lungs. And then we're going to push it out through our mouths to the 3 count. And I want you to think about the fact that with COVID-19, breathing is so important. So being able to teach children how to do this can go right along with any of the discussions that you're having. All right, and we're going to do this all 3 times. So I want you to please breathe in through your nose, 2, 3, and hold, 2, 3, and then breathe out through the mouth, 2, 3, in through the nose, 2, 3, and hold, 2, 3, out through the mouth, 2, 3. One more time, in through the nose, 2, 3, and hold, 2, 3, hold, and then breathe out, 2, 3. Beautiful. Just take a couple of seconds before you open your eyes and come back together. And let's come back together. All right. So you can see what we are doing is the deep belly breaths, right? We talked about the belly rising when you breathe in through your nose, hold for 3 counts, push it out through your mouth. The suggestion is that you repeat this about 3 to 6 times, especially if you're going to be teaching it, right? If you're teaching it to them, you want to do it more than 3 times, but at least if you're doing it by yourself to prepare for the conversation, 3 times. If you decide everybody's going to start the conversation in this way, 3 to 6 times is really good. And make sure that you're teaching it and letting them know why both or all of you are doing it. So.
Great. So that was our first important way of taking care of yourself and your children and young people, right? The next thing that we're going to be talking about is to be able to teach your young people the vocabulary behind anger or sadness, right? Behind some of these feeling words. And so at the end of the day, like I said, these are feelings that, can come up for anyone at any time, at any age, at any point, right? And so feelings like disappointment, right? Shame, confusion, fear, hope, questioning, lonely, determined, sorrow, passionate, depressed, right? When we can identify our emotions as adults using these feeling words, right, you can actually be honest with yourselves at the start and know going in what's coming up for you with these conversations.
Yep. And that's really important to connect that as adults. We've got to be able to, I say that anger sits on top of a lot of different emotions that have not been expressed, right? And we so easily accept from our children and even from ourselves, I'm angry. But angry tends to be something that has been built up. And so when you're not able to say that you're disappointed, when you're not able to say that you're afraid or depressed even, right? We could be very afraid of that word as adults when we hear that coming out of the mouths of children. But we should be grateful if that's the honest expression of how they're feeling. We don't want to hear just anger all the time or even happiness all the time. There are other emotions that are beyond happiness and come before happiness. So when you can identify your own emotions first as adults using feeling words, and you can be honest with yourself at the start, and you know the emotions that are coming up for you going into the conversation, that's going to be really important, because taking care of your emotions is an important part of taking care of yourself and your children and your young people. But also you are giving them the permission, right, to be able to express these emotions. So the first thing you need to do is to connect to your own feelings about the conversation that you're about to have or wanting to have, because maybe you haven't started it yet, but you're thinking, I really want to have this conversation. Like Dan and Kristen, you might be thinking, let's think about what we want to talk about with them, right? And you might be taking the time to think about it together. You also want to name the emotions that are coming up for you as you're planning to do this. So, and I want you to say it out loud to yourself, because it's really helpful. Or say it out loud to your partner that you're doing it with, because if the conversation calls for it, then you want to be able to name it right up front in the conversation as well. To open a conversation with, Justin came to me right before and he's like, I'm really nervous, right? That's wonderful for him to have expressed that. As an adult, we sometimes don't want to name the feelings for our children because we're afraid that it might be too much for them, right? Or we're afraid that then it makes them scared. But what it really does is it normalizes talking about it. And that's what you want to do. With younger children, you may be more hesitant, but practicing and using words that they understand and explaining the more difficult words with examples helps them sustain the conversation. So for instance, like you might be able to say, there are days when I feel sad. Saying that really frees your children because they know sadness is okay. Oh, mommy or daddy or auntie or uncle or grandma, they can be sad. So I can be sad. And that's okay. And it's also a way for them to shed light on something like extended sadness, right? If you're talking about it and every time they're sad, then you may have a clue that, they may be experiencing many, many days of sadness. Don't you want to know that rather than them hiding that, or rather than you thinking that's what's going on, but they've never really expressed it. They don't seem to be able to tell you about it, right? Because frankly, if your children are depressed, I think you want to know that early on. I know for me, I think that's really important. And this is how you teach them that even when the emotions are tough or hard to explain, you can take care of yourself by putting the emotions on the table. That's a part of self-care, naming those emotions. Make it okay for all feelings to be touched and named. You know what I'm saying there? Being touched and name. You got to touch them. You got to know what that feels like, and then you've got to name them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so another way that we're going to be talking about how to take care of yourself and your young people and your young children is to really make sure you're doing something every single day that's making you tune into not only your feelings, but also your body, right? And so what I mean by this is you want to be able to think about what you're doing when you relax. You're spending your leisure time, right? And so with relaxing, perfect way to really think about it is when you are feeling any sort of anxiety, right? If you were to get a glass of water or maybe do some sort of stretch, right, that helps to modify some of that anxiety, right? That's really what we mean by relax, right? And so next, smiling. You can see I'm doing a lot of it. I love to smile, right? I don't know anyone who doesn't love to smile, right? And so putting yourselves in positions to where, you're going to laugh. You're going to make someone else laugh, right? That can really save someone's day, someone's week, someone's 2 weeks, month, anything, lives. That can save a life, putting a smile on someone's face. And so next is crying. And so I really want to talk about crying for a second, especially with young boys and men. So there is the stereotypical man, right? And the stereotypical man doesn't cry. He's, big muscles and, tough guy and, doesn't deal with any of his emotions, right? Doesn't tap into any of his emotions. I want to say that I believe that that's false, that is something that we as a world, as a nation, need to start to move away from, right? I think crying at the end of the day really empowers people, especially young boys and men, right? Because all crying does is it makes you tune into what's really going on for you, what's really coming up. And so being able to separate a feeling like anger, right, from, what's a better feeling? Let me say sadness, right?
Or despair.
Right. Or sadness and depression, right? Being able to really talk about the degrees in which you're feeling some of these feelings, right, can really start to come up with a good cry. Because at the end of the day, when you cry, you got to think about what's causing you to take the emotion that far, right? And so I think this is something we need more in our boys. I really encourage, that you encourage your boys and your men in your lives to cry, especially the ones that are kind of harder to get through and harder to get to when it comes to stuff like this. But, really encourage it. I think that it does nothing but empower people and, boys and men, especially when it comes to dealing with our emotions. We need more empowerment and more safety to do so. Yes.
And let me just say, did you hear that, Pat? Because Pat is one that will say, I'm a crier, and we're telling you it's okay.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Every time. Yes.
Every time.
Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it at all. Right. And so next, right, movement. So getting outside every day, right? If you like to go on walks, jogs, anything like that, if you like to play sports, encouraging that you get some shots up every day, or, you throw a ball around, something like that, really getting yourself outside, getting some fresh air on you, right? That can go a long way when it comes to having to deal with anything that comes up that's, tough in conversation-wise or just, in life, right?
And he meant basketball shots, in case you all have just heard shots, right?
Yeah. Basketball shots, any sort of, hockey shot, anything like that. Sports shots. Yes, that's what we are talking about. Next, pause. I think this is big. I think people, really need to start to think about when it's time to just take a second to, really think about what's going on around you, what's going on in your mind, what's coming up for you, to be able to, allow yourself the time to really sit with yourself and what's going on so that you can move forward in the most productive way possible. I think that's really big. And so I think as people, we want to just do everything, want to get everything done. And as soon as we get everything done, that's when we want to relax. That's when we want to smile and cry and have all these things happen. But, it's really good to incorporate these things in the process, right? And so pausing is definitely big. And lastly, I would say soothe, right? And so with soothing's just like relaxing. It's just that I would say you are really trying to attack what's going on and what's coming up for you, so that you can deal with whatever you're feeling and then move forward and take active steps towards an actual solution. And so let's say your child was crying to you, very upset, very, very upset, and you were to approach them, right, in a soothing manner. You would be asking them, what's going on, right? What's coming up for them, why they're crying, why they're feeling what they're feeling. And then the next step after that, after you get a response, would be, okay, well, what can we do to, sort of get rid of this feeling, to make you happy, to give you the opposite. So from there, it could be, we go get some ice cream, or, we turn on our favorite show, right? From there, that's what really separates soothing and relaxing. So, yeah.
All right. Yep. And so we are not saying that this has to be done every day, right? That you have to do all of these things every day, right? But make sure you do at least one thing from the list, right? Mm-hmm.
Definitely important to do at least one thing every single day. These things really can go a long way. And so if you can incorporate more than one, that's great. But definitely want to start to thinking about at least one thing that you can apply to your schedule every day, for sure. Right,
because we want you to feel loved and cared for by you. That's the big thing, because it takes a lot out of us to have these conversations. Mm-hmm. They're worthwhile, no question. But if you think that you can do it without self-care, then they're not going to be ongoing. It's going to end up being something you dread, actually. And quite frankly, as much as it may be difficult in the process, I look forward to it, because I know that it is a way for us to really be able to, what we call having meaningful talks, I'm finding out what's going on with my kids, right? And they're finding out that I'm human and that they can talk to me even about the most difficult things, all right? And so self-care, that's the number one first step. And that's setting the stage for conversation. And let's talk about setting the stage for conversation, like laying the foundation for conversation that will continue throughout their lives. One of the things that I did early on in my son's lives was to lay that foundation for the conversations that I hoped would be ahead. Like I was thinking about this before they even came along. Like, these are the things that I want to do. I want to have these meaningful conversations. So you need to know that because we want to have the conversations doesn't mean they want to have the conversations, or that the conversations will come quickly or easily. So laying the foundation for them helps to pave the road, though, for that, rather than jumping right in. So I want to ask you, Justin, what's something that you found useful that laid the foundation for us being able to talk about so many difficult and meaningful things when you were growing up?
Right. So what helped me personally, we had a lot of family talks weekly. And so what these talks would consist of, first they would consist of snacks. So growing up, that was just a great way to get me participating. Put food in my face, I'll do whatever you want, right? And so we had someone would be in charge of snacks, and someone else would be in charge of, the topic in which we were going to be talking about. And, everyone could come into the conversation, thinking about maybe certain things that they liked about the week that we had as a family, certain things that we maybe didn't like about the week that we had to go through as a family. And we were able to take those things and put them out on the table to then come up with a solution for how we could change things for the next following week. And so this was really helpful, because even, when I wasn't able to talk, like, we said, I still had a turn. I knew that my words were valued, and whether people could understand me or not, right, I had value behind my feelings. There were, I had a voice. I had, the mic, and I was going to do something with it. And so these talks were great. These talks definitely played a very pivotal role in my life. And so,
yeah, and sure. I want to say, because people say to me, well, what age? He had an older brother and an older cousin. And so they're 6 and 7 years older than him. So they were able to have the conversations. I didn't see the reason to wait till he was doing his nap. I didn't see the reason to say, let's put him in the playpen and, let's get some talking done. I felt let's get him in the process of learning how to have these meaningful conversations early on. And so, as Justin said, we used the talking stick, and we'd pass the talking stick, and he got the talking stick, and we would sit and listen. We had no idea what he was saying, but we would sit and listen, and he would talk. And then by the time he was able to make words and sentences, he already knew the process. And so he was very comfortable and familiar with it. So we're gonna show you or talk about 3 things that we feel really lay the foundation for having meaningful conversations. And we start off with Justin's tip.
Yes. And so my tip, right, is that we want to be clear that it is not the talk, right? It's rather the way that we communicate with each other. So, perfect example, it's not just one talk of sex, right? Sex is a very complex topic, right, with a lot of feelings that, feelings can change over time, right? Different ideas can come about, can be presented to you, right? And your values in which, you go about something like that, can change over time as well. And so with a topic like that, you want to make sure that, your children and your young people really know that with anything, at any point, they're allowed to ask any sort of question, come to you with anything, because, the world is the world and things change. And we as people, we are evolving and growing. And so, being able to really work those things out as the process is going along itself, is very big.
Yeah. And you want to create ritual around the conversations. You heard Justin talk about snacks. One of the things that we said, you don't have to have snacks, but it helps to get them to the table, right? One of the things that we did is we would have pillows, and we would sit on the floor and have our conversations, the ones that we planned out, because trust, you're going to have conversations that you just feel in the moment that you really need to have them. So you may not be able to have the same kind of ritual, but I will tell you in a moment how you can still have ritual. So we would have the pillows, we'd have an agenda, we'd have a talking stick. So that's one way. But you can create ritual around your conversations that happen anywhere and any time by talking about how you want to talk with one another, how you want to the conversations to go. Are you going to have what we call like agreements for how the conversations proceed? But creating ritual is important because it's a way for them to participate right from the start of the conversation as well. You might have, I don't know, sometimes we have bells here too. Maybe you ring a bell. They loved that. They loved being able to start off the conversation. They rang the bell. So create the rituals and open the door to their concerns. I'm going to talk as a parent. I can tell you that when I've decided that we're going to have a conversation, I'm real clear that I have my concerns. And it may not be that they did something wrong. It's just that I'm concerned maybe about how they're processing all this news, right? And I want to make sure that I get that concern out there. But you want to make sure, Justin talked about the pause earlier, you want to make sure you pause and open the door to their concerns. Opening the door could be simple as, I'm really concerned about people are getting sick. What are you concerned about? Or are you concerned about anything? Or have you been thinking about that at all? And I say that before I even tell you more about my concerns. Here you are opening the door to give them the opportunity to talk about it. They might be concerned, their concern might be, well, I'm concerned that we're running out of ice cream. I don't know, but that's okay. That's okay if that's where they start, right? Let it be, don't try to chastise and say, well, we're not talking about ice cream now, right? That's their concern. So maybe they get that out there, and then you try to come at your concern in a different way and to see if they're thinking about it at all. And then the last one is prepare yourself to break culture. I don't know how you grew up. I can tell you I never, ever, ever had meaningful conversations with my parents, ever. In fact, very few of the adults in my life had meaningful conversations with me. They were basically about whatever they wanted to tell us we did wrong. And there were rules. If I participated at all and said anything at all, which wasn't a lot, it had to be in a certain tone. I had to look a certain way. I had to definitely couldn't roll my eyes or sigh or show any kind of frustration or emotion. And if you were brought up like that, then you're going to have to prepare yourself to break culture. Or maybe you were brought up in a different way that really isn't the way that you want to have these conversations with your children. You have to prepare yourself to break culture. In the conversations that we had around these creating this workshop, Justin is very expressive, and he's expressive in a way that I was never allowed to be. So I break culture all the time by hearing him and really listening through that and not allowing myself to have my mom's voice in my ear saying, you know, this is disrespectful, or this, you can't talk to me like that. So really think about what are the things that that you grew up with that you're going to have to break culture around in order for your children and young people to have these kinds of meaningful conversations with you. And I want you to think about that right now, as a matter of fact. I want you to think about, is there anything that you have to prepare yourself to break culture around? All right, so does anybody have anything, or you've already traveled that road? You're done. You're good. You've broken the culture. You can't go back to your parents' house anymore because your kids are out of control. Anybody have anything?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, you know, a bad habit that I remember from my youth, but it's more of it feels like it's more of an approach, right? So we didn't really have a foundation. We didn't have a structure or a ritual to have these. So the thing that comes to my mind is more about how do we start establishing that? So it's less about breaking an old culture as it is creating a new one.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. Because well, that's good. At least you didn't have one. I told you my structure, right? So I got nothing. I got no words in at all. So you can create one. But I love that Dan is like, wow, we don't really have that. I can tell you that ritual in these becomes very important. Even when they may not want to talk about the particular topic, the fact that there's some ritual in setting up the conversation can be really critical. And I have found that the times when I forgot to do something that was a part of the ritual, they got right away, wait a minute, what happened? It wasn't just what happened to the snacks. It was, what happened to the talking stick, or what happened, we're not going to do the bell today. All of those things, whatever you set up will become really important for them. Yeah. Thanks
to give them a path to open up when they're ready. Because imagine one of my kids have is, they're not even if you are ready to have a conversation, your kids may not be.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that they have they can walk through that door when they're able to. Mm-hmm. And so establishing the ritual is more about maybe not seeing results the first time, but then doing it later on down the road, and all of a sudden you start talking about ice cream, but then they know that it's okay to talk about anything, and they can
it's a safe space. It becomes a safe space, right? Is that
yes. And the fact that you didn't put them down for talking about ice cream instead of racism, really does set that stage like, oh, ice cream was okay. Okay, so then anything's okay, right? I can talk about, when you say, what am I concerned about? You really mean that. right? You don't mean, why aren't you concerned about this? You mean, what am I actually concerned about? And that does. And as they change, they developmentally, they change, right? There are conversations that they are going to want to have, and honoring the fact that they may not have anything to say right now, and still going along with the ritual and the process allows them to see that's also part of the process, right? I don't have anything to say, and that's still allowed in the process. So that's really a great point, Dan. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that and for sharing on this. All right, so we're going to keep it moving.
Yes, and so that was great. Yes, thank you so much. And, you know, basically, if you've already laid a good foundation, right, and you're doing the work, you're continuing to pave the road, then your goal is to do more listening than talking, right? And so ultimately, you want to be able to create a flow to these conversations, right? You want to leave space for your young people, whoever it is you're speaking to, you know, take in the information, to speak on whatever it is that they would like to speak on, reflect, to question. That's very big, right? To think out loud and to just wonder about things, right? And so you can do all of those things all while taking it in with deep listening.
Yeah.
And so that's really your goal.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important. The reflection part, especially, save time in the conversations for some reflection. If they're writing age, maybe they come with journals or whatever, right? And that you actually include that in time to write a little bit on a particular thing, and give the opportunity for things like drawing or writing, right? Because that's also a way of having the conversation. If your child draws something and you ask, wow, so tell us about that drawing, they might be drawing about the particular topic that you're talking about, and it's just a better way for them. For them to express what they're feeling through drawing. So really giving some reflection time is very important. So what we're going to do right now, we are going to take you through 2 deep listening skills. And then we're going to demonstrate one of them for you so that you have the opportunity to see how that works. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is listening for feelings and values. This is really critical. A lot of times we listen for content, but we don't listen for feelings and we don't listen for values. And if we're listening for values at all, we're listening to hear whether our children have the values we've instilled in them. And I assure you that they do, but they also may either have some of their own or have a different way of expressing that same value. Okay, so I'll give you a really good example. We had one of our meaningful conversations with my oldest son, Jabari, and my niece, Sakai, and Justin was the baby. And the conversation was about apologizing, because my value is that we should apologize to each other when we do something wrong, right? And so we had this great talk, according to me, about value, about apologizing, right? And finished up, we go, and they said, wait a minute. And I said, okay. And my niece started, and she said, you put a lot of emphasis on saying you're sorry like you mean it. And we don't care whether they mean it or not. If they just said sorry, we're good. And I thought, wow, really? And my son joined in. That's right. Now, this was their relationship because they spent a lot of time with each other. So while it wasn't that they didn't value apologizing and being sincere, they were saying that wasn't needed between the sincerity, or sounding sincere, really is what they were saying. Sounding sincere wasn't necessary between them. And I needed to understand that value. I just thought that was great. I truly did. So really thinking about when you're listening for feelings and values that they may be expressed very differently from what you're thinking. But I want you to listen to what's not being named along with what is being named, especially when it comes to feelings. Well, most of us don't speak in values speak anyway. Oh, I value, right? That's not value. That's not what we speak. But we also, a lot of us don't speak in feelings speak either. Like we'll name the safer ones, but what's underneath, right, the really deeper ones that are really paining us, we often don't bring those to the surface. So we want to be listening for that. And then we want to check in with feeling words. We want to check in to see if this is what they're feeling. And then listen for what's important to them, what they value. Right? Values are, can be things like honesty or safety or family or belonging, right? That's a big value, and sometimes that clashes with our values. Like if our child is feeling like if they speak up about something like racism, right? That they're not going to belong. And if we can't hear that as the adults in their lives and understand that that's a value for them, whether we want them to have it or not, then we're not going to have those meaningful conversations. We've got to be able to take in what it is that they're saying. So Justin and I decided we're going to actually demonstrate this one because we want you to get a sense of how this might go for you with children. Okay? You good with that, you all? All right. Awesome. Okay. All right, Justin, you are going to be the child. Is that all right?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I think you guys should switch roles just for fun. Switch roles.
All right. And I will be the parents. I'll be me. Okay? All right. So with any conversation, you want to be able to open the door, right? Okay. So I really wanted to just find out from you what's happening in school today. It seems like something might have happened, and I'm not sure if it did or not. I'd love to hear if something's on your mind at all.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, kids aren't being nice to me. I'm being, nice to everyone, inviting, saying hi, and being myself. And, kids are just being really, really mean to me. I don't know if it's because I'm the new kid or not, or, if I'm doing something, but that just seems to be the result that I'm getting.
And how long has this been going on?
It's been about a week. It's fairly new,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm fairly new, so
Right.
I guess I get it.
Yeah.
New kid.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really painful for you. Sounds like it's lonely. It sounds like you might feel really lonely and out of the loop, maybe. I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
Yes.
Right?
I feel out of place.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I don't belong.
Yeah, and that's important. Belonging is important to you. What have you tried to do anything? Have you talked to anyone about it? Said anything about it at all?
No one would get it, so I just keep to myself.
You don't feel like anybody really is going to understand it. Well, what do you think we should do about it? I really want to help you do something about it.
I don't know. So I just gotta keep going and keep doing what I'm doing, I guess. Hope for a better result.
Well, it sounds like I don't know, I'm hearing defeated? You feel defeated already, or it feels hopeless to you that nothing's going to change?
Yeah.
All right. So, first of all, thank you for letting me know. Right. I know you didn't have to, but thank you for letting me know. And we are going to look at how we can do something about this. I want to help in this. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm the mom. I'm supposed to help, and I hope that you will help me to sit down and think about how we can do this. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So obviously, if you have younger children, the conversation may go a little differently. If you have children that it's not easy for them to talk, it may go a little differently. But one of the ways that you get them to talk more is to be able to hear beneath the words. I call it hearing beneath the words, to things like the feelings and the values, and to try to really put them out there to see if this is what they're feeling, right? Or if this is what's going on for them. I know sometimes we can meet this with, well, you know, everybody doesn't have to be your friend, but you know, we have our own sayings, and we have these things that we're trying to do to get them to see that maybe what they're feeling and dealing with isn't as important as they're making it, but it is as important as they're making it. And if we're going to give them that sense, that owning that this is really important to me and to them, right, and to us, then we've got to be able to put on the table as much of what they're feeling and as much as what they value, so that we can help them be able to talk about this even more. And there may be times when we may personally feel disappointed in where they are with these particular topics, right? But again, we've got to be able to allow them to put things on the table. Does that make sense to folks? Yep. Did anybody have any question about that particular listening technique? Nope. All right. Pat, was that a...
It's not a question as much as I was amazed that the conversation didn't have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. What it was just opening up something for more conversation. And I think most of the time we feel like we have to finish it now or it doesn't count as being done. And so that was nice to see.
Yeah, because sometimes it needs to be... Here's the thing that I found with these conversations. Sometimes you leave unresolved, and you have to learn how to be okay with unresolved for now. And that's why it's not the talk, and that's why it's ongoing conversation. Because when we think it is the talk or it is this conversation, we can't leave with unresolved. And we sometimes push to resolve as opposed to being able to sit with where we are now. This is where we are. It's sad, right? We haven't resolved this. They're feeling really sad in this. But if we're going to be able to have this be an ongoing conversation, we're going to have to leave it here for now and then pick it back up again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you noticed that, because absolutely, that is exactly what it is.
Yes. And so the second listening tip that we want to get into is being able to listen beyond our comfort zone, right? There are going to be times in these conversations in which you are going to feel uncomfortable. It can even visibly come off that you're uncomfortable, right? So being able to fight through those points in the best way possible, right? These are some of the tips that we have to present to you. And so really being able to feel into the point in which you are not comfortable. So understanding what is causing so much uncomfortability, right? Where it's coming from, right? And how you're able to work past it, how you're able to come up with a possible solution for keeping the conversation going and keeping it on course, right? And so another great way, another great technique is taking 3 deep breaths. And so we've been talking about breathing this whole time, but and 3 is just a start number, right? So if you feel 5 is what you need, if you feel 1, just really big, deep 1 is what you need to get yourself recentered, right? It's really about recentering. It's really about channeling in. Then really find those times in which, you're going to be doing so, right? So there's times where you can kind of, anticipate when something's going to be said that's going to rub you the wrong way, right? Or times where, something out of nowhere can completely throw you off your guard, right? And so being able to, say, okay, I need a second, right? And doing something with that second, that's really great stuff. And so next, you just want to encourage your children to continue talking, right? So in those conversations, just letting them know, this is okay. Well, your feeling's okay, right? If there's something that you feel as if there's more that you can get out of them, asking them, we'll expand a little bit more on this, tell me a little bit more about, where this is coming from, what is causing this to be something for you, how long has this been going on for you, right? So just really making sure that the conversation doesn't feel as if, at any point it has to end, right? And so that's very big. Next, this is, oh my gosh, this is huge for me on a personal level as a young person speaking, right? You really want to watch your nonverbals. So what I mean by that, right? If there's something, right, that is said that causes a type of face or a, right, any, right, that's normal. The feeling, right, of that is normal, right? No one is dismissing that. I will say just letting it come out, right? That is where it can really become, almost detrimental towards the goal in which you're trying to achieve, right? And so when these things come up for a young person, right, it makes us feel like, the conversation's done, right? It's like, even in the beginning when we're trying to open it up and we get a response like that, it makes us feel as if, we can't open up, as if it's not safe to open up, as if there's certain things that, we have to, kind of walk on eggshells about, right? And we want to completely get rid of that feeling. At the end of the day, life is life. We're going to feel a lot of things are going to come up, right? And so being able to, understand that those feelings will come up for, an adult, right? But really working through those so that, you continue to just, maintain the goal at hand. That's huge. That will shape, so many things in your communication.
And I have to say that can happen at a young age. It really can. That we can have those nonverbals that make that communicate to them that this is wrong, right? And I encourage you to, if you get feedback from your children on your nonverbals, pay attention to it. Pay attention to it and work on it. Because they can see you. You can't see you. So they're not lying. They're just, and you can't get out by saying, well, that's not what I mean when I raise my eyebrows. It doesn't matter. When you raise your eyebrows, they interpret it from their perspective. It doesn't really matter what your perspective is.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Next, right? So you want to be able to listen one point further past your discomfort, right? Or wanting to jump in and speak, right? And so there are going to be times where you feel as if, there's a certain point that you have in the conversation that just has to get out. It has to get out at this specific time, right? And if it doesn't, then, all the value behind it goes away, right? And so we want to step away from that, right? We want to basically check ourselves. We want to check the times in which we sense that, we're just building up, right? A lot of what comes up when it comes to interrupting conversations and, getting these loud points across, what comes up is the fear in which that, our words are going to lose value. And our words are not going to, hit as hard. They're not going to get through as hard. And so, that's just, that, a lot comes with that. And so being able to realize that, in a conversation, all words at all times are important, right? And so just giving each other the space to, feel what they feel, say what you got to say, right? And then whatever it is after that you have to relay after, then allowing it to come at that time, right? We always want to be heard, right? But we also want others to feel heard when, we're around. And so only way we can do that is by actually just doing the hearing. As hard as it can be, we got to do it, right? We got to be able to check ourselves in those times. And lastly, what I would say, which is very, very big, reflecting back to them on what you've heard, and so paraphrasing. So my mom did this beautifully. She does this beautifully, all the time when it comes to.
But I try.
I would say a lot more that I don't give her as much credit. I will say that. She doesn't get as much credit as she should for this.
Thank you.
But when it comes to paraphrasing, right, that's perfect because it allows you to let the other person know sort of what you've taken away from whatever it is that you're hearing, the information that you've gathered, right? And then relay back to them sort of what you've got so that they can clarify whether it is, you're on track with, what they're saying, you're understanding, you're really getting it, or they have to clear some things up. So when it comes to paraphrasing, it's basically just allowing that space for that to happen. And when that happens, when you're unclear, in those moments you can be unclear about, what you're feeling and when, you really want to be able to clear that up with the person in which you're speaking to. So paraphrasing, definitely huge. You want to be on the same page at all times of these conversations.
Yeah, and it teaches your children, too, how to repeat it back. And the younger you start, the more they will, it may start as a mimicking of you, but then they really learn how to use that skill at an early age. All right, so both of the listening skills that we talking about are really centered around feelings. And we just feel like that's just a huge piece. It creates real psychological safety when your children not only know that their feelings are valued, but that they have a real range of a vocabulary for those feelings, right? And that the deeper ones, while they may be scary or difficult for you to hear, you are willing to sit through and allow those deeper feelings to be put on the table. I think that that's just an important part. And I know for Justin, I said before that he's an empath. I think I said it. I don't know if I said it earlier on, or yeah, I did. Okay. And I'm just wondering how you, where does it come from for you to be comfortable to name your feelings? How do you do that? Because that does not happen with everyone.
Yeah. I'd say for me personally, there's one simple step, and this works wonders for me. I'm asking myself questions, right? And so I'm asking myself when it comes to these feelings, why are these emotions coming up? Where are they coming from? What's causing me to feel, what I'm feeling at this level? So, for example, being able to say, okay, I'm angry, right? Well, what can I do about my anger? And then if I'm heated or something like that on a deeper level. So it's a deeper level of anger if I'm sad and I'm feeling, any sort of depression, right? Being able to use those feeling words that we've talked about to really identify what I'm feeling so that I can identify really the most accurate solution is what helps me. Because at the end of the day, with these feelings, you got to have something, that'll help, kind of counter some of these things that are going to come up. And so, like I said, with relaxing, if you feel anxiety, getting a big glass of water, drinking that down, enjoying that, looking out of a window, that's a great way to relax, right? And so looking at sort of what I'm feeling, why, right, specifically what that feeling is so that I can really start to attack appropriately.
And it's interesting because at a very young age, he is the only child, and I've worked for years and years and years with children and teenagers. And he's the only child that I ever heard say, "Mom, I'm jealous of that particular child." Like, kids don't like to say jealousy. It's rare that you hear any child, adults won't admit they're jealous, but children don't want to say that they're jealous. That's a real hard one to articulate. And very young age, I'm going to say it was probably second or third grade that he said that. And I really feel like that comes from him knowing that there's safety in expressing his feelings in these conversations. So what we're going to talk about now is, as we're talking about feelings, it's really important for you to be able to feel, sit in, appreciate, and use your emotions. So let's see. How do we do that? First is to tune in to what it actually feels like to feel something. And I said fear, like fear, but it's whatever emotion. What does it actually feel like to feel that emotion, especially if it's an intense emotion? We tend to run from that. And what we're saying is that you've got to really feel that. And the reason why this is important in difficult conversations is because emotions are just going to come up, and they are such a stopper. They're such a reason to end a conversation, because you're not able to really feel that and then still continue in the conversation. So really practicing when feelings come up for you that are intense, how does it feel in your heart and your mind and your body? And I love teaching this to kids because the body piece, they get that. Young ones especially, they get it. So the younger you teach them, the better, because as they get older, they get into teens, they kind of not really sure, especially if they haven't talked about it before. But where in your body does it show up? For me, fear shows up in my heart, in my head, in my mind. When it shows up, it's usually just like my mind races, it doesn't stop. And in my body, it often shows up in my gut. Like fear really does place itself there. So knowing where it is for you is really crucial. And then choose to be fully present with it no matter what. Don't tune it out. Don't try to change the subject. Don't recognize the strength of it, right? The intensity of it. I mean, you have to choose to be fully present. Like, this is what is happening right now. I am feeling such intense fear. And if you are able to say that in the conversation and say that you need a minute to work it through, or maybe you don't say it in the conversation, but you're really aware that this is what's happening, then you stay present with it. And then you feel it and use the energy from the intensity of it to stay engaged. And sometimes I will do actually a physical lean forward, which is my signal to myself that I've got to stay engaged. And what I most likely will do is try to see if I can get them to either continue talking if they're already talking, or if it's me that was talking and the feelings come up, I might try to turn it over to Justin or to my oldest, and I might try to turn it over to them. But the point is to use the intensity of that moment, not to run away or shut it down, but to actually stay engaged. And I want to just check in to see, does that make sense to you? Yeah. And I'm telling you, the lean, it helps me. The lean, because it's just the body needs that reminder, because what the body really wants to do is this, right? I got to get away from this. This is horrible. Why do I have to talk to my kids about this? Like, I don't want to do this. That's what the body really wants to do. But the lean reminds the body, we're going to use this intensity to just stay engaged, and we'll figure out how to do that. Right? And this might be the appropriate place for breathe and pause. But leaning in to do that, right? Reminder to really stay engaged. Okay? All right. So
I'm struggling with that one a little bit.
Say that again, Dan?
Oh yeah, I'm struggling with that one a little bit.
Okay, good.
Like conceptually, I kind of get it, right? To focus the energy on the task at hand and try to refocus it, right? maybe this is just a reflection that I'm not good at it, but sometimes I just think I almost have to think about compartmentalizing it, right? Separate it. And I almost have, right? So I'm almost having the opposite reaction where if I'm torqued because of the topic that we're having the conversation, or maybe something else is going on.
Yeah.
I could, in order to keep present and in order to kind of maintain composure and poise, I almost have to push it down. And maybe, what are your thoughts there? I'm trying to.
You're saying separate your thinking from your emotions, or like your cognitive feelings?
Sometimes, yeah. Because maybe I just can't kind of blend them. And maybe I don't understand it as well as I think.
No, I think you do understand it, Dan. I really do, because one of the things I think I hear you saying is that for you, what works is that you've got to get it to be less intense in order for you to be able to continue. And what I would encourage you to do, Dan, is to do both. And not at the same time, but to do both. I would say in one conversation, see what happens when you push it down, and see if then that allows you to continue. And then the next time, try to really keep it and feel it and sit in it and use it to move forward and see where that goes. I think one of the things that we're afraid of is that the intensity of it will take over and we will no longer really be in control at that point, and we're likely to say or do anything. But one of the ways that I think that tends to happen is that we're not present with it, that we actually allow the feeling to go on its own as opposed to being fully present. This is shame, and I feel it so intensely. You're fully present with it. And that means that you are free actually to do what you need to do with that intensity, because you're right here. It's not left you. There's times when feelings just take over. This is not what we're talking about. I think that you should really try both and see where it leads you. The pushing it down, right? Or the feeling very present, not liking it, like I'm not liking this feeling, but I'm here with it, and I'm going to keep moving forward with the conversation and see where that takes me.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really trying out, and I'm glad that you know yourself. You're like, look.
Yeah.
That's
a very big step. You just took a very big step, just being able to admit the strengths, right? Being able to admit, the areas that just need more work. It's not a weakness at all. It's just, an area that needs more time, experimenting with. And so, being able to realize that and then ask the questions, right? That's exactly what it is we're looking for. So that's perfect.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Oops, sorry. Yep.
So, yes, this is probably one of my favorite parts to talk about, right? We're going to be talking about how to work on our responses, right? Responding rather than react.
Right, and that's really what you're talking about, Dan. Yep. So we've talked a little bit about these first two, right? Giving yourself time to think, right? Understanding what you're feeling and why. So using those pauses, right? Your breath to really start to tune in with some of those things. But some of the things that we haven't talked about, right? You want to hear yourself, right? So tone is very, very big, right? Really how loud you are, right? Really how the words are coming out, firm tone, kind of a calmer tone, right? Those are very much things that you want to look out for and listen out for sure, right? Just like I've said, practice a pause and breath, right? Just allowing yourself the opportunity to just recenter, get your thoughts together and really get the response out that you want to get out, right? And so when you're allowed to, kind of work it out in your head, it's easier to get it out, and it sounds like what you're trying to really convey. So practice of pause and breath is very, very, very big. Breathe. Mm-hmm.
You want to also own a bad start. So this happens, right? Some of these topics, they're going to be big. They're going to be very, very uncomfortable, right? And reaction is just going to come out, right?
Yeah.
You're not even going to think about a response, right? Because as humans, as people, right, we can just react. And so being able to realize that, in those moments that, that's not necessarily where you were trying to go with the information that you were trying to present, being able to sit there, own it, let that be known, right? So saying, hey, that's really not how I wanted to start this conversation, right? It's not how I was trying to get my words out. That really can do a lot for, like I've been saying, recentering back to the goal at hand. So owning a bad start is definitely very big, and doing a rewind, right? So these two can kind of go hand in hand. And so when you have that bad start, being able to say, okay, well, can we take it back to either the beginning, right? Or back to, wherever it is that the conversation started to get, I guess, thrown off course. So being able to let these things be known and then take those active steps to just allow yourself to really get out what it is that you're trying to get out in the way that you want it to come out. It was very, very pivotal for these conversations. And lastly, just remind yourself of your desire to have a meaningful conversation, right? At the end of the day, that's the goal. So being able to tell yourself in those toughest of times, we have a goal at hand. And the goal at hand is to just get what we feel out into the open, right? Announce it, let it be known, let it be heard, and to create that ongoing dialogue type of environment, right? That's the goal at hand. And so it's very, very hard to remind yourself, especially when you feel like reactions are coming up, when the emotions are starting to sort of take over and, really steer the wheel, right? But, we have control of that wheel at all times, right? And so just being able to revert back to, what is the goal at hand is very, very big when it comes to, how you're conveying your messages and, the place you're coming from.
Yeah. So, and I say, Dan, that I think that this is part of what you were talking about, is that it is really about us being afraid that we are going to have some kind of a reaction that's going to just shut the whole thing down. And being able to remind yourself of any of these, right, to be able to do any of these can also be helpful to you. And I'll tell you that last one, remind yourself of your desire to have a meaningful conversation, I will say that to myself over and over again in the times when it gets really, really difficult to continue to listen through or to continue to have the conversation. I remind myself of the goal, and that is that I really want this. I not only want this conversation to be meaningful, but I want us to continue to have meaningful conversations. So I'll own a bad start in a minute. I'll do a rewind in a minute just for that goal. I got to have this meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
Make sense, folks? Yeah. All right. So we're at the place where we're going to tell you about the 3 big mistakes, right? You do not want to make if you want to engage in difficult conversation. You don't want to assume anything. And that might be obvious, but I don't think we recognize how much assuming we do. Yeah. And as parents, we really make big assumptions. Oh, these are our kids. We know our kids. Oh, I know what they're thinking. I know what they're feeling, or I know how they're going to react to this, or those are all assumptions. And we really want to make sure that we don't assume anything, that we really leave it clean for whatever can come up in a conversation. So that's a big mistake that we make, number 1.
Yes, and number 2, this is something I really wanted to personally touch on, because this is from personal experience, right? Avoiding mental health check-ins, right? And so if you're a young person or anyone in your life is experiencing anything like depression, like anxiety, right? And they have a bad day, really not blaming that bad day or whatever bad moment on their mental health, right? And so I think a very easy thing that, you'll see is if someone is on any sort of medication, right, and they're off of their medication one day and their actions seem to be a little bit different from, yesterday or the day before, right, being able to step away from the old, oh, well, they've got to be off their meds or they're off their medication, right, or that's got to be, it's got to just be their depression talking or their anxiety talking, right, whereas really, people are just people. People have bad days. Bad luck just comes about for everyone on certain days, right? And so being able to take the information for what it is, right? When it's being presented to you, and you can tell and read when you have to go deeper when it comes to those things. But overall, in the first steps of checking in and seeing how someone's day is going, right? Stepping away from oh, it's gotta just be their anxiety talking, it's gotta just be their depression talking. We can have those things come about for us, and they can be feelings that we have to deal with and work through. But they're not us. They don't own us. They're not, anything that can consume us. They don't take over how we, really want to go about stuff. And so, people are people. That's really what it is.
And then the reverse of that too is if we stay away completely from ever checking in on our children's mental health, right? Sometimes that's a real scary place for us to go, and we don't do it. And they may really need us to find out that something is happening that they might need some help with. And unfortunately, it's younger and younger children that are dealing with mental health issues. And so we really do want to, we don't want to avoid it on either way. We don't want to avoid it, checking in to see if something is happening, and we don't want to avoid being the kind of parent that doesn't assume, right, that this isn't in relationship to anxiety or depression if our children have already had that kind of diagnosis. And then the last thing, the big mistake, is preaching. And what I mean by preaching is that we have this big talk in our head already. We know what we want to say. And for the life of us, we cannot stop talking until we say every single word of what we had planned to say. That is preaching. Even if it isn't preaching the way you might know it in terms of in church, right? It is preaching, because we are just going on and on and on and not letting in the conversation, right? Conversation is hopefully that dialogue, as opposed to us as parents telling our children all of the things that we want to tell them and feel that they need to know before we allow them entree into the conversation. Yep. Okay. So let's do this. Let's ask this question. How many of us have ever made any of these mistakes?
I love it.
Oh, I should raise my hand. You know that. I mean, I may be the conflict closer 40 years in, but come on, I'm human, right? Yes, absolutely. And I came up from a preaching mother, so it slips in there when it wants to. But for the most part, I try not to. Yeah. So it's common mistakes, and all it's going to do is just take time. And I'll tell you, the longer you establish the ongoing conversations, right, over the years or whatever, months, years, the less you will do of these three big mistakes. So, sorry. All right. Thank you for being honest about that. And so quickly, too.
Yes. Everyone's hands at the same time. Yes.
Everyone's hands went up. All right. Okay, so we are rounding toward the end, and we're going to talk about one more thing with you and then open it up for questions. And the thing that we are going to talk about is how you take, how you take the parts of conflict that people dread, right, and turn them into learning opportunities. Because so many of us dread conflict. I know that from experience. And we want to turn them into learning opportunities. So here's the things that I've found. There's just 4 examples of things that people dread about conflicts. Emotional outbursts. They're scared that, particularly if we're talking about our kids, that maybe there'll be some kind of emotional outburst. Maybe it could be simply that they burst into tears and can't seem to stop, or that they get really angry, upset, hurt, scared, right? Maybe that becomes an emotional outburst. They might even have a tantrum, or they just may actually start saying things that you don't want them to say. I know there are households where certain words you don't express. We don't say hate in our family or whatever it is, and that may come out in an emotional outburst, and we may be afraid of that. We are afraid of long silence. So how uncomfortable were you with that? Right? We're afraid of long silence. And we have to really recognize that that's a part of it, right? Justin will talk about that in a minute, but we're afraid when fear takes over, right? We might get really afraid of this particular topic, or really afraid of what we're hearing from our kids. I can't even tell you how many times that has happened in my life as a parent, that fear really is very, very present and begins to take over, and then either I shut it down with some kind of a command or some kind of instant solution, or I get really upset, and then I'm all over the place emotionally. That's something that people really don't look forward to. They really dread that that's going to happen. And then the other big one is I've made it worse, or I'm going to make it worse. Like if I do this wrong, if I don't do everything right, if I don't say the right things, then it's really going to be made worse. So what do we do then to turn that into something that's learning experience? So how do we take each of these and turn them into learning experience?
Right. And the big thing is your mindset, right? At the end of the day, our minds are, the most powerful bone in our body, the most powerful weapon that we have. And so being able to really, yes, take whatever the information that's coming to you for what it is, but, to, see the positive, right? To see the possible, good that could come about from some of these things. So when it comes to an emotional outburst, right, recognizing that for someone, that it's maybe hard to, come out and talk about anything, right, and to take those steps, right, that, that outburst is really a breakthrough for them, right, and so that's one way, right. When it comes to long silence, when you can sense that the silence is going on too long, or it's overall just being a part of the conversation, realizing that it's not that, maybe anyone's assuming anything, or the conversation's gone bad, or anywhere near an end, right? It can be that something's going to be said that could cause a new beginning to the conversation, right? And so all of this comes from just mindset, right? When you feel like fear is taking over, really that comes from wanting the goal to be met, right? And so that at the end of the day is just like we've said, reminding what comes with these conversations is, we have a goal to meet, right? Yeah. We have more comfortability to bring in to the dynamic of the household or the family or whatever, or the relationship, right? We have more of, just something that needs to be done, and you're really just trying to meet it. That's really all that the fear comes from. Yeah. And lastly, when it comes to making anything worse, that's just really when the real work starts. That's when the real work begins. That's when the real, accepting of certain things, things that you might have to work on, things that, maybe aren't good right now, but, putting them out there in the open so that they're known, right, with the intent of trying to make them better, that's really the work. That's the work in itself. And so when you feel like it's, when you sense yourself saying, I feel like this isn't going where it should, it really is. That's what it really is.
It is.
And so.
A lot of lessons in that.
Yes.
I can remember one of the best moments. I can remember with my oldest son. Oh my God, we had this terrible, terrible conversation. We both ended up yelling at each other. I might have even slammed his door, and I don't even like slamming doors or like them slamming doors. And I went into my room and I was like, oh my God, that was so bad. And I went back into his room. I maybe took 20 minutes, took some time, and I'm like, well, that went badly. He said it sure did. And we were able to actually go from there. Both seeing, like, that was just really bad, but it was okay to say that it was bad. And that really was a meaningful part of the conversation, right? And so that the next time we looked at, well, we don't want to go there again, right? What did we do the last time that really sent it off the rails? We don't want to do that again this time. And that's a learning experience for us in continuing to do the work.
Yes, yes. And lastly, just as a solution, you know, like we've been talking about breathing, right? Watching your breath. I can say personally that breathing has saved my life. I can say breathing has, you know, gotten me out of certain situations that, you know, I didn't want to be in, certain environments I maybe didn't want to be a part of, right? And being able to give myself that time to, you know, recenter and remind myself, you know, all of who I am, what I'm about, really where I'm trying to go with whatever it is that I'm doing, right? The goal at hand, all from a breath and taking the time to breathe and tune in, you know, it works wonders, you know, and so really watch your breath. Your breath can do a lot for you.
Yep. All right.
Yes.
So it's a lot. I know we've shared a lot.
Yes.
So we are going to breathe. That's right, Karen.
Yes.
That's right. We are going to breathe as we take it in. And it's not a bad way to end your conversations if you have an actual formal end, right? They don't always have to have a formal end. But if you decide that you want a formal end, taking breaths together, I often will say, wow, oh my gosh, that was really intense. How about we take a breath here? Yeah, let's really breathe. So let's do some breathing. Let's take a minute to do that, and then we'll open it up for questions that you might have. So taking a lot of information in. So let's breathe in through our nose. And let's hold that like we're holding in everything that we've taken in. And then we're going to breathe new life into it as we breathe out through the mouth. And breathing in, taking it in, letting it sit with us and hold it, and then breathe out again. New life to whatever it is we're going to do with this information. And then one more breath in through the nose. Breathing in the intensity, any feelings, holding it and letting them circulate throughout, being fully present, and then breathing it out. And then just sit with what you are feeling, what you've taken in, what you've experienced, just thinking about, just sit with it. And then I'm going to ask you to tune into your body. Like, your body was here with you, taking it in as well. And if you notice anything that you're feeling within your body, that's so important. When I talked in the beginning about recover, right? Making sure that you don't leave out what the conversation has done to your body. It could be a great feeling, or it could be tension, it could be intensity. Noticing that too. Okay, so I hope this was helpful and useful. I know for me, I'll speak for myself. I won't be the parent and speak for both of us. I'll speak for myself and say that I just really enjoyed spending this time with each of you, and I'm grateful that you invested in us and in the opportunity to learn.